Flames and shadows. Kael stood at the edge of the cliff, watching as dawn broke over the vast, jagged expanse of the Ashen Spine Mountains. The ember mark beneath his sleeve throbbed gently in rhythm with his heart, a constant reminder of what he carried, and what he was becoming. Behind him, Lira packed their gear in silence, her motions swift and practiced. They had traveled for 8 days since fleeing the burning ruins of Ashmere. 8 days of winding mountain trails, sleeping in caves, and avoiding the patrols of the Cloaked Ones, who Kael had learned were called the Umbercast. The ember in him seemed to repel them, and also attract them. Lira said they were drawn to its power like moths to flame, but wary of getting burned. Kael had questions, so many questions, but Lira offered few answers. She kept her words measured, her eyes always scanning the horizon. Trust didn't come easy to her. But Kael saw the worry in her face when she thought he wasn't looking, especially at night, when the ember pulsed brightest and dreams of fire returned. They set off as the sun cleared the mountain peaks, their path winding through a narrow canyon filled with mist. Kael walked behind Lira, watching the way she moved, like a wolf always on alert. She said they were headed toward a place called Derenhold, an old fortress hidden deep in the mountains. That's where the Ember Archive is, she said. If any place holds answers, it's there. Answers about what? Kael had asked. About you. They reached the edge of a stone bridge just before noon. It arched high over a gorge, narrow and crumbling with age. Kael paused, eyes fixed on the deep chasm below. Still afraid of heights? Lira asked without turning. Kael grunted. Not afraid, just cautious. You'll need more than caution where we're going. They crossed one at a time. Halfway across, Kael felt a sudden flare of heat on his arm. The mark glowed through the fabric, brighter than ever. A wind rose from the chasm, and Kael's breath caught. From the mist below, shapes emerged, floating, twisting, black as tar and trailing wisps of shadow. They weren't solid, but their presence was unmistakably real. The air turned cold. Keep moving, Lira shouted. The wraith-like shapes surged upward. Kael ran. The stone cracked beneath him just as he reached the far end. Lira caught his arm and hauled him forward as the bridge collapsed behind them, sending the shadow things shrieking back into the gorge. They didn't stop running until they reached a small outcrop overlooking a frozen lake. What were those? Kael panted. Wraith shades, Lira said, drawn to the ember. They almost caught us, but they didn't. She knelt beside him, her tone suddenly softer. You've got more power than you know. It's why they're coming. Why the Umbercast are hunting you. He looked at the glowing mark on his arm. I don't want this. Doesn't matter. You have it. Now we figure out what that means, before they do. That night, Kael couldn't sleep. The ember burned like a brand beneath his skin, and every time he closed his eyes, the visions returned. Fire sweeping across fields, a tower cracking under pressure. A man cloaked in shadow, reaching out with a hand wreathed in blue flame. Kael sat up, sweating, breath ragged. Lira was already awake, sitting by the fire. Nightmares again? She asked. They feel real, Kael whispered. Too real. They are real, Lira said. The ember doesn't just carry power. It carries memory, pieces of those who bore it before you. Their fates, their fears. Kael looked up. Did you see them too? When you had the ember? Lira didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. I did, and it almost broke me. Kael swallowed. So what did you do? I ran from it, tried to bury it, but that only made it worse. She met his gaze. You can't outrun the ember, Kael. You have to face it. Control it, and if I can't, she stood, then it will consume you. The next 2 days passed in a haze of cold wind and treacherous climbs. The higher they went, the thinner the air became, and Kael could feel the ember burning hotter in his veins. It responded to danger, to his emotions, even to his thoughts. He was beginning to fear it. By the evening of the 10th day, they reached a ledge where the mountain split open like a wound. Before them, half buried in snow and stone, rose an ancient fortress, its outer walls cracked and veined with frost, but its towers still proud. The sigil carved above the gate was a sun wrapped in flame. Derenhold. Kael stared at it with a strange mix of awe and dread. This place looks dead. It's sleeping, Lira said. And now you're the spark that's going to wake it up. She pressed her palm to the gate's center. Nothing happened. Then Kael stepped forward. As his mark drew near the stone, it pulsed brightly. The doors groaned and slowly began to open. Inside, they found a wide hall choked with dust. Statues lined the walls, some broken, others covered in moss and cobwebs. At the far end, an enormous brazier sat cold and empty. Kael stepped toward it. The ember on his arm began to hum. "Light it," Lira said. "How?" "Feel it." Kael closed his eyes and reached inward. At first, all he felt was warmth. Then pressure, like something trying to burst out. He raised his hand and let the heat guide him. A tongue of flame leapt from his palm. The brazier roared to life. Golden fire filled the hall, casting away centuries of darkness in a single heartbeat. And for the first time, Kael felt something shift inside him, not fear, but belonging. The fortress was no longer asleep. It had felt him. They explored the interior for hours. Derenhold was a maze of stone corridors, forgotten libraries, echoing chambers, and hidden staircases. Most of it was empty. But not all of it. In one chamber, they found murals carved into the walls, scenes of ancient wars. Flamebearers stood against legions of shadow. Kael saw the ember symbol repeated again and again. But in the final panel, the flamebearers were gone. And in their place stood a man wrapped in shadow, with blue fire in his hands. "That's him," Kael whispered. From the visions, Lira's jaw tightened. The one who ended the ember line. His name was Varan. What is he? He was a flamebearer. The last, until you. That night, Kael trained in the fortress courtyard. Lira stood beside him, a wooden staff in hand. "Control is everything," she said. "Draw power from the ember, but don't let it draw from you." He tried. Over and over, he tried. Sometimes the fire obeyed. Other times, it lashed out wildly. Once, it exploded from his hands in a shockwave that knocked Lira to the ground. She got up, coughing, but smiling. "You're getting stronger," she said. "That's good." "It doesn't feel good," Kael muttered. She stepped closer. "It never does. Power always costs something." Kael looked at the ember glowing through his skin. "What did it cost you?" Her smile faded. "Everything." The next morning, the storm came. Snow fell thick and fast, blanketing the mountains in white silence. Kael and Lira were trapped in the fortress for 2 days, huddled near the brazier's magical fire. Kael used the time to study the murals and scrolls he'd found in a hidden chamber beneath the hall. They spoke of flamebearers of old, each gifted by the ember, each hunted by the umbercast. There were stories of battles, of betrayals, and of something else. Something older than the ember itself. A being, called Nurathar, the shadow below flame. Kael asked Lira about it. She frowned. That name hasn't been spoken in centuries. Who was he? Not who. What? The first to turn flame into shadow. The thing Varan sought in the dark places of the world. Kael's breath caught. Is it still alive? Lira didn't answer. She didn't need to. On the third night at Derenhold, Kael was awakened by silence. Not the peaceful kind, but a wrong kind, a stillness that felt like the air itself was holding its breath. He sat up, senses alert. The ember beneath his skin flared faintly. Lira was already on her feet, her blades drawn, eyes fixed on the stairwell leading up from the lower vaults. "They're here," she whispered. Kael didn't ask how she knew. The fortress shuddered. A low groan echoed through the stone, followed by a sharp, unnatural clang. The kind of sound iron makes when it's been warped. Then came footsteps, too many, too synchronized. Kael rushed to the main hall with Lira behind him. They arrived just as the outer gate trembled under an unseen force. "Get to the vault," Lira hissed. "There's something down there you need to see. I'm not leaving you." She turned and grabbed his shoulders, her face inches from his. "You are leaving. I'll hold them." Before he could argue, she shoved him hard. He stumbled backward, caught his balance, and ran toward the eastern stairwell. Behind him, the great gate cracked and burst open with a scream of steel. The vault was colder than the rest of the fortress. Kael's breath fogged the air as he descended into the belly of Derenhold, where the firelight of the ember barely reached. The stairs ended in a chamber of stone lined with ancient metalwork and old, sealed doorways. In the center of the floor was a strange mechanism, half disc, half brazier, with no fire. But Kael felt something there. Something powerful. He knelt beside it and placed his hand on the surface. Nothing happened. Then the ember mark on his arm glowed, bright and searing, and a whisper echoed in his mind. Ash to light, blood to flame. Pain shot through him as the mark pulsed. A single drop of blood spilled from his palm onto the disc. It ignited. Flame burst upward, spinning in a ring. The chamber blazed with ancient symbols, and the ground trembled. From the light, an object rose. A sword. It hovered in the air, glowing faintly with the same fire that pulsed within Kael. He reached out. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, the ember roared through him, memories, power, pain, and a single name. Aetherbrand. The blade settled in his hand. Light wrapped around his arm like armor, and he stood, stronger, steadier. Above, he heard the clash of steel. Lira was fighting, and she was losing. Kael raced through the halls, sword in hand. The ember surged with each step, and the fortress responded. Fires lit in braziers that had been cold for centuries. Doors opened ahead of him. It was as if Derenhold itself knew a Flamebearer walked its halls again. He reached the main gate just in time to see Lira fall. She hit the stones hard, her side bleeding. 3 figures in dark cloaks stood over her, umbrecast. One turned as Kael entered. He was taller than the others, face hidden beneath a hood marked with runes. In his hand, a staff tipped with a black crystal. So, the figure said, voice like smoke, the ember has chosen again. Kael said nothing. He stepped forward, lifting the sword. You don't know what you carry, the figure continued. But we do, and we cannot allow it to awaken again. The crystal at the staff's tip glowed. The shadows behind him stirred. Kael didn't hesitate. He moved. The sword burned through the air in a streak of golden flame. The nearest, umbrecast screamed as Kael struck him down, his cloak catching fire that didn't extinguish. The other moved to flank him, but Kael ducked, spun, and drove the blade through his chest. The lead figure snarled. You are no warrior. Kael stepped over Lira, his voice low. Maybe not. He raised Aetherbrand. But I'm a Flamebearer. The figure unleashed a wave of shadow. Kael met it with fire. The blast rocked the hall, stone shattering, glass bursting, the very air turning to smoke. When it cleared, only Kael stood, the sword in hand, breath ragged. The figure was gone. Afterward, Kael helped Lira to her feet. You should have run, she rasped, blood on her lips. I'm done running. She smiled weakly. Good. He looked at the sword, still warm in his hand. What is this thing? Aetherbrand, she whispered. The sword of the first Flamebearer. I didn't think it was real. It chose me. She nodded. Then it's starting. Just like before. Kael stared at the flickering fires of the hall, the ember in his skin burning steady. He wasn't ready, but he had no choice. Derenhold burned behind them. Kael and Lira moved through the frozen forest below the fortress, the rising dawn casting long, golden rays between snow-laden branches. Kael didn't look back. The Umbrecasti's assault had left the fortress fractured and bleeding, just like its history. They'd taken nothing but what they could carry. Aetherbrand, a bundle of Lira's maps and scrolls, and a shard of the black crystal Kael had pried from the fallen Umbrecasti's staff. It pulsed with a faint, cold energy that made the ember in his skin itch. Lira limped beside him, her wound bound in cloth. We need shelter, she said through gritted teeth. Kael nodded. The map showed caves nearby. East Ridge, she muttered. 2 miles. They moved quickly. The wind picked up as they climbed, howling like wolves through the rocks. Kael felt something behind it, something watching. When they reached the cave, Kael sealed the entrance with fire and built a narrow flame to keep the cold at bay. Lira collapsed against the wall. I'm fine, she said before he could speak. He didn't believe her. Instead, he unrolled the map. Symbols danced on the parchment, strange glyphs that shifted when the ember flared. As Kael traced his fingers over them, one began to glow brighter than the rest, a circle of flame crossed by a single black line. What's this? He asked. Lira opened one eye. The Cinder Gate. Kael frowned. Sounds friendly. It's not, but it's the only path left to us. Where does it lead? Beneath the world. That night, Kael sat by the flickering fire, the crystal shard in his palm. It throbbed faintly, like a dying heartbeat. He tried to ignore it, but the ember in him seemed to sense it. Aetherbrand lay nearby, its blade dimmed but warm. Kael touched his ember-marked arm and closed his eyes. The visions came again, clearer now. He saw a chamber of obsidian, lit by violet flame, a throne carved from bones, and on it, a figure draped in black, flames of blue rising from his eyes. Varin. The fallen Flamebearer turned his head toward Kael, as if seeing him across the boundaries of time. You are not ready, Varin said. Kael tried to speak, but no sound came. Varin rose from the throne, and as he stepped forward, the blue flames coiled around him like serpents. You will burn like the rest, he whispered. Unless you embrace the fire. The vision shattered. Kael gasped awake, his palm smoking, the crystal shard now cracked. Lira stirred. What did you see, Varin? She sat upright despite the pain. He's watching. Kael's voice trembled. He said I'll burn. She looked into the fire. He would know. By the second morning, Lira could walk again, barely. They set off east toward the Cinder Gate, following narrow mountain paths that twisted through frozen forests and forgotten ruins. The landscape was raw and ancient, bones of the world, exposed. As they walked, Kael asked, why did the Flamebearers fall? Lira took a long time to answer. They didn't fall, she said. They were betrayed. By Varen, by fear, his, and others. The Ember's power was never meant to be hoarded. But they feared what would happen if it spread. Kael frowned. So they tried to control it. They tried to own it. And when they couldn't, they destroyed anyone who refused to bow. Kael looked at Aetherbrand. And now it's back. Lira met his eyes. Now you're back. They reached the Cinder Gate at dusk. It wasn't what Kael expected. A vast arch of stone, half buried in ice and draped in vines, rose from a cliffside. Symbols pulsed faintly along its rim. At its center was a curtain of swirling smoke that didn't move with the wind. Kael approached. The ember flared. The gate responded, flames igniting in carved grooves along its surface. Lira drew her sword. Through here lies the Emberpath. What is that? A scar, she said. Cut across the underworld. Kael took a breath, then stepped through. The Emberpath was a wound in the world. Beyond the Cinder Gate, the light faded almost instantly. Kael stepped into a tunnel of dark stone, his footfalls echoing. The air smelled of ash and old fire. Walls breathed heat like a sleeping beast. Lira followed, her sword drawn, eyes scanning the dark. What is this place? Kael whispered. A crucible, she said. The Flamebearers once walked this path before they were deemed worthy. So it's a test. No, she said. It's a memory. They walked for hours. Time didn't flow the same here. The deeper they went, the more the ember inside Kael seemed to stir, drawing up fragments of feelings he couldn't place, sights he'd never seen, names that didn't belong to him. He saw brief flashes. A city in flame, a tower collapsing into the sea. A woman's voice, whispering, remember who you were. Kael stumbled. The visions came faster now. Make it stop, he gasped. Lira knelt beside him. You're not going mad. You're awakening. I don't want to awaken like this. She gripped his shoulder. The ember remembers its wielders. And it remembers Varen. He walked here too. Kael shivered. They came to a chamber where the path split three ways. At the center was a statue of a hooded Flamebearer, arms open, flame frozen in stone between them. Etched on the floor was a single phrase. Choose not the path of ease, but the fire that burns clean. Lira stood before it, silent. Kael stared at the three tunnels. One was lit with soft, golden light. One was pitch black. The third glowed with pulsing red embers, like a heartbeat. He stepped toward the third. That's the hardest one, Lira warned. I know. You don't need to prove anything to me. I'm not, Kael said, touching the ember on his arm. I'm proving it to him. He stepped inside. The air thickened. Heat rose like waves. The stone glowed with ancient magic. Kael gripped Aetherbrand tighter, the ember thrumming in sync with his pulse. The tunnel opened into a cavern filled with fire. Literal rivers of flame flowed below jagged rock bridges. Shapes moved in the fire, figures made of heat and memory, watching silently. Kael moved forward. At the center of the cavern was a single pillar of stone, and on it stood a boy. He was maybe 10, eyes wide with fear. Flames circled his feet. Kael froze. I know this place. The boy turned. Kael stared. It was him. The child's mouth moved, and Kael heard the words echo in his skull. You left me. There. Kael fell to his knees. No. I tried. Flames rose. The boy's figure twisted, became shadow, then flame, then Varen, standing over him once again. You cannot wield the fire until you face the pain that made you, the vision said. Kael gritted his teeth. Then burn me. The cavern exploded with fire. He was floating, weightless, lost. Then the ember surged, and the flames didn't consume him. They changed him, wrapped around him like armor. His skin did not blister. His breath did not fail. And from within the fire, a voice spoke, not Varen's, not the boy's. A voice older than words. He is not ready, but he will be. When Kael opened his eyes, he stood alone at the cavern's edge. The fire was gone, the child was gone, but in his hand, Aetherbrand burned brighter than ever, golden flame tracing ancient runes down the blade. Lira stood at the tunnel's edge. You passed. Kael looked at her. What was that? A memory, she said. One that tried to break you. Kael touched the ember on his skin. It didn't. No, she said, it didn't. Dash dash dash. They emerged from the Emberpath beneath a sky of blood-red clouds. The land before them was unlike anything Kael had seen, a vast plain of scorched earth, twisted trees, and rivers of molten glass. In the distance, a mountain loomed. Black, jagged, waiting. That's it, Lira said. The spine of ash. Kael stared at it, the ember flaring in his veins. Varan is there, and so are the answers, she said. Kael looked at the horizon, sword in hand, ember burning, past behind him, fire ahead. Then that's where we go.